endangered species, on environment protection. Shanky Rohela ji, please apne ko mute. Yeah, please mute yourself. Everybody, please be on mute. And plus, now in his new role as an administrator and as his a role dear to him must be, inspiring people to conserve biodiversity. So, Professor Satish, you are here at a very opportune time. They've just had a lecture on ecosystem biodiversity conservation, and our participants will be very glad to hear you speak on the species biodiversity conservation. And who else better than him? He has been handling species so well. He's worked on wolves in Singapore, and whenever I introduce him, I never forget to relate this anecdote of seeing him handling a snake with just a stick and handling it very, very efficiently. So probably he'll be sharing some interesting anecdotes with you, and also some scientific facts and figures that will convince everybody for action for biodiversity conservation. So thank you so much, Professor Satish, for your time. We know you're very busy. Thank you very much for finding time for our participants, and we all look forward to your engaging session.
Thank you, Dr. Faiza. Thank you so much for introducing. I'm really sorry that I was late for almost 5 to 6 minutes.
It's all right.
Yeah. So let us go with this. There are several technical things in the talk, and which will just refer and push go ahead, and we'll make it more general, so that most of participants, they can understand. And if you have any issue in understanding or knowing anything or clarification, you can stop me then and there, and we can discuss it. So we'll discuss general, what is happening about biodiversity conservation in India, and what are the different stats, what stresses, stress factors, how is economy related to biodiversity, what are the basically major biodiversity areas all over the world and in India, what are the reasons for some certain areas, certain regions to be so diverse in biodiversity or in biodiversity values in comparison to other regions or areas. So we'll discuss towards end the causes and pros and cons of such variation or variability in biodiversity or biodiversity values. And as we know that generally biodiversity is the total number of species or taxa which are represented in an area that basically represents the biodiversity, or we can say species richness. Technically, if you look, then distribution of species is also very important. That is not only the richness, but it is also the distribution, how species are distributed in their numbers. So that basically ultimately decides the total diversity of a particular area. Now, for a layman, we can say, or generally, we say that it is the richness, species richness, number of species which are represented in an area. In 1992, there was a World United Nations Environment Conference in Rio de Janeiro. Most of us are knowing about this. So there, a very crisp definition of biodiversity was given when there was a meeting of CBD, or Convention on Biological Diversity, that biodiversity is a variability of life forms, inter alia, that is including terrestrial, marine, ecosystems, and all the basically organisms of which basically these ecosystems they are part of. So that basically that is basically biodiversity. So it includes all aquatic, marine, terrestrial, organisms which are present all over the world or in a particular landscape. Now, as far as the threats, or you can say just a connection between biodiversity and losses, it is believed that 7% of biodiversity we have already lost by 2000 of the total biodiversity, and many species or many taxa, especially the lower biota, they are going extinct without even getting noticed by scientists or biologists, not only in India but all over the world. And I'm saying microbiota or smaller organisms, whereas the larger, as far as the larger vertebrates is concerned, extensive data has been recorded not only nationally but also internationally. The database is well documented and preserved. But smaller microorganisms, which are equally important. No, if you see, say, for instance, pharmaceutical industries, you say our day-to-day, 90% of the rural populace, they still depend upon the biodiversity resources for their well-being, for no, their day-to-day dependence. Whereas in cities, people have forgot this, and most of the people are in business, people are after money. That is the major drawback, or that is the major challenge to biodiversity, that most of the people in current scenario, they are after money. And scientists are worried that if this practice continues, then perhaps by 2050, we will be losing about 63% of our biodiversity or biodiversity values. By 2050, we will be losing. Projections have been made that by about 63% of the species taxa will be lost or will be losing them by 2050. Then, as far as the total diversity or total species is concerned, there are hot debates about this. Some taxonomy say that there are about 7 million species which have been predicted to be present all over the world, including marine and aquatic, terrestrial, forest, basically 8.7 million, and 2.3 million of them are marine. That is, they are present in marine environments, and 86% of the species on Earth and 91% oceans still wait description. Means this 8.7 which have been typified or documented, still 86% on Earth and 91% on marine environments, they still need description, or they still await description. Means they are still unknown, right? Then now, generally, if there's a equation which is basically biological diversity is equal to F. F is function. It's a function of climate, CL climate, organisms, O or topography, then parent material, that is where the taxa or where the species or biodiversity is present. That is basically important. No habitats. No, so parental material is where the biodiversity is present, where the species are present. Then time. No, time is very important. Temporally, spatially and temporally, the biodiversity value or biodiversity forms, they vary. Then it also depends upon the genetics or the heredity. Certain species, they evolve quickly, they evolve into different taxa, in smaller time lags, whereas others, they require enormous, very long time periods for developing into different varieties and species. So we can say that biological diversity is a function of climate, organisms, topography, then parental materials, time, and heredity. So all these factors, they markedly influence the biodiversity of a particular area. Now, many approaches, for conserving biological diversity of the country, they are basically, as well as also in the world, there are several acts, there are certain action plans, there are some conventions, there are in situ conservation methods, there are ex situ conservation methods. In situ means, like say, preserving them or conserving them in their natural habitats wherever they are present per se. So we have to all the approaches which are not designed for preserving and conserving wildlife in the natural habitats, they come under the in situ conservation methods, whereas ex situ are like snake exclosing animals under human care, like in zoo, parks. In situ means like national parks, wildlife sanctuaries, tiger reserves, so on, community reserve, conservation reserves, biosphere reserves. So all these methods are basically broad approaches of conserving biodiversity. Ex situ, in situ, sorry, in situ. Ex situ are under human care in zoos, captivities, like say gene banks, germ plants, labs, so tissue culture. So all these basically methods of propagating species, that comes under the ex situ conservation. Now the forests, they act as guardians of and protectors of flora as well as fauna. Forests are one very important, not only forests, basically grasslands, wetlands, but forests are basically major basically stakeholders, or say major what you call the areas which harbor biodiversity values, and somebody from economics know, it is believed that in India, right from forest, about 128 trillion, produces are basically are sold in the market, domestic and international, and 128 trillion rupees are generated out of forest every year in India. Then you can think of the rest of the world, the countries which are even more diverse or more having more diversity than India. The forests, they are in the hands of majority of population, due to which resources are available are being consumed at alarming rates. Because most of the people, communities, we are directly or indirectly associated with forests. So therefore, a large, basically, resources which are available, they are consumed at a much higher rates than they have been in use no long ago or 50 years ago. Now, it also uses many forms of fertility, shelter animals, as well as tribal populations. The forests, forests are also have also uses, means several rivers, organic matter that is channeled from forest to rivers or through small streams, their tributaries to the terrestrial habitats. मतलब जो फॉरेस्ट से रिवर जो emerge होती हैं वो जो है सारा उस बायोमास को इंटीग्रेटेड पुट्रीफाइड और जो फर्टिलिटी का काम करता है उसको जो है वो ट्रांसफर करते हैं वहां से to other places. So that is how forests are very important sources of fertility also. Then forests are the means of generating revenue for state by supplying various materials, raw materials like say timber, minor, major forest produce, that is non-timber produces, and which are used in industries within the country as well as globally. So that is how forests are so important for every citizen, every one of us. Forests are reason behind climate change, and they are controlling the quality of air and water. So that is why another very important term which is used these days, that climate change. Many things are happening because of climate change, but this climate change is mainly mediated by humans, largely by humans, and all these catastrophes like say floods and then fires and then cloudbursts which are happening, they are they used to be natural, but now most of it is happening. It is said that it is natural calamity, but it is not natural. It is human mediated, and it is accelerating. The forests, they are in use by, the user of forests have recklessly utilized the forest for cultivation. Like, so a lot of people have moved onto, by removing the forest on the fringes of the forest and come up with their settlements, or they have settled there and raised agriculture and also personal consumption from wood, timber, fuel, and fodder for their cattle or livestock, which is reared by the people. And still in rural areas, livestock raising is a major, basically, incentive and method of generating revenue or for their day-to-day living because of livestock. The need for legislation protecting and regulating forests was required, and 1927 comprehensive, or say better, refined Forest Act came. Before that, it was 1965, and then 1865, then 1868, then 1927, then 1980, and then 1984. So these are the different forest acts which have been amended or changed from time to time, depending upon the circumstances and the policies. Right, the act of the act imposes governmental control over forests, means classifying them into reserve, protected, and village forests. So in this act, the forests were classified into reserve, protected, and village. Means village forest means privately owned forests. Sometimes they are called as the community forest. And reserve and forest forests, the main difference is that the reserve forests are they are protected under judiciary legal system, whereas protected forest is under the parliament. There's a legal body that is through Parliament Act the forests are protected. So such forests which are protected by taking into Parliament Act, that is basically they are known as the, like say, National Park or Wildlife Sanctuary, if it is to be declared, pass through Parliament, so they are known as the protected forests, protected areas. So that is the difference between reserve and protected forest. And then we have just talked about 1865, then 1828, 1927. The Imperial Forest Department was set up in 1864 in the British Empire through various legislations, and the British government was empowered to declare any land which is covered with tree as a forest, and to be managed subsequently by the government. In 1878, the British government basically acquired sovereignty over, means total power over the forest. So that was different. Otherwise, it was already there in place. But in 1878, the Forest Act or the forest reserves or the forest types, they were totally under the power or under the control of the forest department or the government. In this case, the local rights of the people also, they were basically refused, that those people, communities who have been living there, and then no harvesting resources, alarmingly, that was also checked in this act. Okay, then also it attempted to basically regulate the collection of forest produces or forest products by forest dwellers, and some activities also were declared as offenses, and imprisonment and fines were imposed to people who were recklessly cutting trees or recklessly removing the forest from the forest ecosystems. Brandeis Dietrich, basically the first forester who was appointed by British regime in 1856, and then after 10 years, 1866, he was basically declared as the first Inspector General of India, and that time it was called the Imperial Forest Imperial Forest Service, which is now called as the Indian Forest Service. That was basically Imperial Forest Service. And within 1927, it was further amended, and forest communities whose life were impacted, they were dealt with in detail, that what are their rights, and what type of forest products they should be basically allowed to collect from the forest, and what are the checks on them. Then it was basically to restrain the use of forest. The main purpose was to restrain or to check the use of the forest, or say rampant use of or excessive use of forests. Then in 1980, the Forest Conservation Act was basically came into existence, and here it was basically that the control of ongoing deforestation of India, that policy framework was to be brought in this. It was to be integrated in the postulates or in the salient feature of the act, that the ongoing deforestation is checked, because population was increasing and there were more and more pressures on timber and non-timber produces the forest. So that is why the Indian Forest Act 1980 it came. Then Indian Wildlife Protection Act 1972, which was thoroughly revised in 2023 April. It was gazetted, and earlier there were 6 schedules in Indian Wildlife Protection Act, which have been reduced to 4, and there are 7 chapters and 66 sections in the Indian Wildlife Protection Act. And the first 2 schedules, Schedule 1 and Schedule 2, they basically deal with animals that are rare, and there is a very comprehensive punishment for people who basically try to kill or try to hunt or try to basically capture or handle these animals listed in Schedule 1 and Schedule 2. Okay, this is a typical scrub forest in Rajasthan, Sariska, then savanna, or what you call it, the grassland or scrubland, bushland in the front. So we have a very diverse kinds of ecosystems and landscapes from north to south and from east to west. Similarly, north to south, there is a decline in precipitation. Similarly, as you go from west to east, the rainfall or precipitation increases drastically on the northeastern side. We have very high rainfall, highest reported in the country. So that is why, because of these gradients in rainfall and precipitation, or mainly rainfall, and then the topography of the area, the diversity varies markedly from region to region, from area to area, and from one biographic zone to another biographic zone. Again, now this is one species which is seen here in dry deciduous forest. It lives in thorn forests like in Andhra, Nagarjuna Sagar, then right in the evergreen forests in the Himalayas, and also in the semi-arid area. So it is one of the most adapted species of the cats, as far as the cat species is concerned. The only problem with this is that there is excessive poaching and disturbance in its habitat. Otherwise, it is a very widely adapted species to almost all kinds of habitats. It has been, the tigers have got adaptations. Dense coniferous forest. Now you can see this is rainforest, what you call as the Himalayas coniferous forest, and then you can see marked difference in the scrub forest, or what you call the dry deciduous forest in the previous slides, and this evergreen. This is basically again a pine forest, coniferous forest again, but in the lower elevations, say around up to 1200 to 600 to 1300 meters. These pine forests, Pinus roxburghii, and a mix of other 5-6 species, they occur in the Shivalik, or say lower Himalayas or Himalayan foothills. Then we have the thick bamboo forests in the northeast, and also interspersed in Western Ghats, in Himalayas. We have bamboo species which are distributed all over the biographic zones, but there is very high diversity of bamboo species in northeast India. And bamboos have a very typical habit of flowering in once in 100 years, and then the entire bamboo species landscape, it flowers, and the seeds, they go to the ground, and there is likelihood of emergence of diseases like plague. It is reported that plague was connected to bamboo flowering, because there are lots of seeds which accumulate on the floor when the bamboos flower, and species like rats, they proliferate, and likelihood of transmission or emergence of diseases like plague are very high. Then okay, this is a fragmented landscape in Western Ghats, where we have tea and coffee plantations, and just on the backdrop of this picture, you can see thick evergreen forest, whereas in the foreground, this is privately owned forest, and now people are basically planting, or they are using these privately owned forest patches for commercial crops like tea and cardamom, and then coffee, and there's a lot of wildlife, and the native species, they have been removed from these areas. So they have become more or less, you can say, monocultures, means 1 or 2 species are present there, whereas the natural species or natural communities which were present there earlier, they have been removed and replaced by this. So means we are reducing our biological values, biodiversity values, by doing such activities. Now, action plans are basically directed for protecting a particular species, a particular habitat, or say restoring a particular species. Like there are action plans for restoring gharials, for restoring Gangetic dolphin, Susu, which is found in the Ganges and some of its tributaries. So action plans are basically species oriented, or say habitat oriented. There is specific objective for which a particular action plan is prepared. And once those objectives of such action plans are fulfilled, completed, then that becomes then less useful. But they are directed for protecting species. Now, action plans are like conservation of microorganisms, which help in reclamation of wastelands, revival of biological potential of land. Like if microorganisms are reclaimed, means they are restored. Say, suppose there is a wetland, there are thousands and thousands, millions of microorganisms which are present in a wetland, and that control the entire dynamics, soil dynamics, the entire recycling of organic and inorganic matter on this body. So restoration of microorganisms is very important for maintaining the health of wetland or any other water body. Traffic is another basically action plan. Traffic is trade-related analysis of flora and fauna of internet. Then CITES is convention on I'm just forgetting this. Convention on International Trade in Endangered Species of Flora and Fauna. That is CITES. Then traffic is trade-related analysis of flora and fauna in commerce. So these are also basically the bodies and action plans which basically control the trade of species which are in wildlife trade. Then we have it has multiplication and breeding of threatened species, like several species which are threatened with extinction. The captive breeding programs are basically in place for them. So action plans are also like, say, for several amphibian species which are present in Western Ghats. Many of them are critically endangered, and they are found in just one square kilometer patch and nowhere else. So such species, the captive breeding program is basically underway, and so action plans deal with such endangered species, captive breeding programs also. It also basically action plan may also be protecting traditional skills and knowledge for conservation, right? So these are some of the issues which are taken up in action plans. Then conventions, like say Bonn Convention in 1979, then which came into force in 1883, and the International Treaty on Conservation of Migratory Species, that is CMS, Conservation of Migratory Species, that all the species which migrate intercontinent, between continents of one country to another, the local governments, is their responsibility to provide conservation measures for such species. There are about 131 parties under the Bonn Convention, means 131 countries or governments. They basically take care of this convention, Bonn Convention. Now, CITES was conceptualized in 1963, and it came into force in 1975. There are roughly 5,600 species of animals and about 30 species of plants. They are protected by CITES, Convention on International Trade on Endangered Species, and against exploitation or over exploitation through international trade. So they are all dealt with under the CITES, and conservation measures are provided to all these species under the CITES. Now, it has two important indices. First, appendices. Appendix 1 includes the species which are in danger of extinction, and second is basically need monitoring, means their population are also becoming threatened and they need continuous monitoring. Then Ramsar Convention is another important convention which basically deals with conservation of wetlands and especially the birds or the bird species which are found in the wetlands. It came into force in 1975, and there are 171 contracting parties which are basically which are signatories to the Ramsar Convention. And as of today, there are 2,500 wetlands which are listed as Ramsar sites world over, and there are 85 in India. UP, Uttar Pradesh is also very rich in Ramsar sites. This Upper Ganga canal very close to Aligarh in Narora is basically one Ramsar site in Uttar Pradesh, closest to Aligarh. Then protected areas, in situ conservation, basically we just a minute, please, just a minute. The slide has gone from this. जरा सा आइएगा प्लीज जी. Sorry, excuse me. इस स्क्रीन यहाँ से So we'll talk about the protected areas. Protected areas are the basic conservation areas that are established on land or water, and in which human occupation or at least exploitation of resources by humans is prohibited. So that is what protected area is all about. Wildlife sanctuary, national park, or community reserve, or conservation reserve. They are the conservation areas, and human occupation in these areas is avoided or prohibited. Now, these protected areas, they are notified under Chapter 4. As I told you, there are 7 chapters in the Wildlife Protection Act, and these protected areas, they are notified under Chapter 4 of the Act, and tiger reserves are notified under Chapter 4, Section B of NTCA, National Tiger Conservation Authority. So this is a separate body now which deals with the protection of tigers in the country, NTCA, which was brought in 2004 by amending the Indian Wildlife Protection Act and making NTCA as a separate entity body to preserve tigers. Now, these are the locations which receive which receive attention because of their natural, ecological, and cultural values. That is why the protected area are there. The major purpose is of building protected areas across landscapes is to conserve biological diversity. That is, there is this one way, in situ way, or in situ method of preserving and conserving biological diversity. There are more than 2 lakh protected areas world over, and representing between 10 to 15% of the world terrestrial and marine areas. So very small area, which of course now significantly has been added recently. Earlier it was less than 5%. Now the area has gone to 10 to 15% of the total area.
Narendra sir, please mute your mic.
Then a network of a very comprehensive network of protected areas is existing in India today, and which is nearly 5.3% of the total geographical area in India, and it comprises 106 national parks, 573 wildlife sanctuaries, 115 conservation reserves, 220 community reserves as notified by Ministry of Environment and Forests in November 2023. Besides, apart from this, there are 55 tiger reserves and 33 elephant reserves, which are spanning in over 18 and 14 states respectively. This is the scene of different biography. We have 10 biographic zones of the country ranging from Himalayas to sub-Himalayan foothills, then Gangetic Plain, Deccan Plateau, the largest biographic zone, then Western Ghats here on the western uh, most part, which is biodiversity hotspot, and Northeast India, which is extremely diverse in biological diversity, and then desert ecosystems here or desert biome on the northwest India. So that is the total. And these are the dispersion, or say how the different protected areas, community reserves, conservation reserve, uh, national parks and wildlife sanctuaries, they are dispersed. So very good network of protected areas is there in the country, but several, hundreds of them, they are very small areas. They are very small, just few square kilometers only, but there's a good coverage. Now, this is the statistics. Nearly 5.3% of the total land mass of the country and aquatic habitats that is covered by protected areas, 5.3%. So very less representation. Now we'll quickly go through this. We have, as I told you, that there are four types of protected areas: national parks, wildlife sanctuaries, conservation reserves, and community reserves. Now, all these protected areas, they are declared, or they are there because of unique geomorphological features, because of unique flora and fauna, and their unique cultural values and unique significance to humans and livestock, or the people who are dependent on these forest resources, or what you call the protected areas. They are established again for the purpose of propagating biodiversity values and developing wildlife. It's strictly reserved for betterment of wildlife, and activities such as grazing, forestry, cultivation are not permitted in national park. So this is one key difference between a national park and wildlife sanctuaries. Whereas in wildlife sanctuary, grazing is permitted, can be permitted, not is permitted, but can be permitted by the state biodiversity boards and state wildlife authorities. Whereas in national park, the grazing is not allowed, and harvesting of the resources from national parks, that is also not allowed in a national park. Occasionally, sometimes rarely, and pinch periods, or when it is demand is too high, then it can be permitted, harvesting of the minor forest produces from the national parks. But otherwise, the forest produces, or any other product produced from the forest, is not permitted to be harvested in the national park. They are open for scientific studies, and generally in a national park, there is an emphasis for protection of a particular plant species or a particular animal species. Wildlife sanctuaries are more or less same. They also have similar purpose of protecting or conserving them. They have some national zoological significance, geomorphological significance, wetlands, watersheds. They are there. So they are, once you protected area, then all these watersheds, they are also protected, and the fauna and flora, they are protected. The difference between the two is that here, sometimes the partial grazing is allowed in the buffer area of the sanctuaries, whereas in national park it is not allowed. And controlled harvesting of the forest produces is also permitted in wildlife sanctuaries, whereas in national park it is not. Then the main difference is that in a national park and a wildlife sanctuary, which lies is bestowing or entrusting the rights of the people. That in a national park, all rights of the people, they have to be settled when a national park is being declared. जो वहाँ पे कम्युनिटीज रह रही हैं, उनका जो है राइट्स जो है वो उसको नेशनल पार्क को सेटल करने से पहले ही जो है डिसाइड किया जाता है. Whereas in वाइल्ड सेंचुरी, अगर लग रहा है कि जो है वाइल्ड सेंचुरी यहाँ फॉरेस्ट बहुत इंपॉर्टेंट है और प्रेशर इस पे बहुत ज्यादा है, और कम्युनिटीज दे आर डिपेंडेंट, एंड कम्युनिटीज दे आर राइट इन द फॉरेस्ट ऑल्सो. In such cases, the wildlife sanctuary, in such cases of wildlife sanctuaries, the rights of the people can be dealt with subsequently or later on, and the sanctuary can be declared so as to minimize the pressures or biotic pressures on the protected area. Now, Conservation reserves are basically they are declared by state governments, and they are owned by government, and usually they are located next to the national parks. As I told you that reserve forests, we talked about somewhere in the beginning about reserve forests and protected forests and village forests. So reserve forests are generally the forest patches or forests which are present outside these protected areas. Say you have a national park, and outside we cannot declare you have a reserve forest of say 5,000 square kilometer. Entire area cannot be declared as a national park, but say 400 square kilometer area is declared as national park. The remaining, which is reserve forest, that is basically again very important, or that serves as a very important linkage or corridor for dispersing uh, for dispersal of the wildlife from one area to another, or to settle in the surrounding areas. So such a reserve, no, for forest, they are basically generally declared by government as conservation reserve from time to time, because they are very important linkages for connecting habitats across landscapes or across regions. So that is basically a conservation reserve. Conservation reserve, if you look on the map, they are generally located around the national parks or wildlife sanctuaries in the reserve forests. So if government think that this particular reserve forest is very important, and there is some disturbance because in reserve forest grazing is also there, timber collection is there, everything, all human activities are there. So if area is very important, then it can be declared as a conservation reserve, and so that it becomes significant. It carries some significance in enhance conservation values of a particularly protected area, that is national park or wildlife sanctuary, around which it is present. Community reserves, on the other hand, are also basically declared by they are also declared by state government, but they are located in the community lands. They are owned by people. If people think that there is a wetland, there is a forest patch, there is a sacred grove, or there is patch of grassland which is important for them for grazing, say in summer, in pinch periods when there is crisis for fodder. So such areas, if they think that in future there may be some highway, there may be some railway or rail network, or there may be some no other developmental activity, no, maybe launched by government, or that area may come under pressure, or it may be lost. So then such communities, if they perceive this, then they can talk to state government and they can declare that area as community reserve, so that it has long-term significance in conservation or fulfilling their requirements. So by declaring community reserves, several people, communities have come forward and resulted in declaration of community reserves, which currently are 220 in India. So that is the difference between community reserves and conservation reserves. Besides this, there are tiger reserves and elephant reserves. Tiger reserves have increased from 9 when Project Tiger was launched in 1973. Why we are talking about tiger basically here is because it is a top carnivore. It is apex carnivore. Apex means it is on top of the food chain. जो आपका फूड चेन है फॉरेस्ट में, उस या स्क्रब लैंड में या स्क्रब में फॉरेस्ट में, उसमें जो है टॉप कार्निवोर है. So it controls the populations, it controls the regulations, or it regulates several basically the dynamics of the entire ecosystem. So if you conserve tiger, all those communities in the landscape where tiger is present, they are automatically or indirectly protected. So that is why tiger is very important link for conserving biological diversity of the country, because it provides enormous spaces for conservation or preservation of several other species, associated species. Tiger reserves are spread in 18 states. The recent one, which were declared in 2023, is Dholpur area in Rajasthan, that is the 55th Tiger Reserve. And elephant reserves are 32, which are spread over 14 states and covering more than 18,000 square kilometer area, and significant. And the biosphere reserves are 18, and they are spread in 15 states, one union territory. There are 701 biosphere reserves spread over 124 countries. In India, we are having 18 biosphere reserves. And then there are World Heritage Sites, which are 40 and spread in 17 countries, and they are also associated culturally with very closely with humans. World Heritage Sites. Now, tiger reserves, there's no need of going into details, but it was launched in 1973 by the Congress. Actually, Mrs. Indira Gandhi, former Prime Minister, late Mrs. Indira Gandhi was the brainchild of Mrs. Indira Gandhi, with the licensing of WWF International, WWF India, and the state forest departments when tigers numbers were dwindling continuously. So in 1973, the Project Tiger was launched in 9 tiger reserves, and now these numbers have now changed, or they have gone to 55 in number. Biosphere reserves, unlike national park and wildlife sanctuaries, they are enormous, gigantic, huge areas, usually more than 5,000 square kilometer area, and they cover humans, livestock, forest land, agricultural landscape, everything. It's an amalgam of everything: livestock, humans, their agriculture, and people, communities, all are there. And Man and Biosphere Reserve Map program was launched in 1974 by UNESCO, and all over the world, different biosphere reserves have been declared from time to time. And in India, the first biosphere reserve was declared in South India, that is Nilgiri Biosphere Reserve, that is the oldest biosphere reserve of the country, and they come under the UNESCO. And in India, Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change, they basically provide funding for maintaining these biosphere reserves, which harbor a mix of people, communities all over in all the biosphere reserves. Now, it is basically contributing to in situ conservation of biological diversity in a big way, or you can say, but in a semi-natural way, because there are people also within the biosphere reserves. So that is why we are using the term semi-natural way, because there are people, livestock also within the biosphere reserves. The biosphere reserves, they contribute significantly to sustainable economic development, because people are there, livestock is being raised, commercial plantations, harvesting of the resources. So it provides way for sustainable economic development of the area where we have the biosphere reserve. And it also provides facilities for long-term ecological studies. Means you have livestock, you have wildlife, you have people. So you can find out, basically, people or scientists study basically that they are very good sites for documenting changes, how changes are happening when people are present in a forest ecosystem, right? So all those changes can nicely be studied and documented, and message spread that how humans, they influence the forests and or the grasslands or protected areas in a densely populated area or country like India. These biosphere reserves, as well as the sanctuaries and the national parks, they have 3 zones: core zone, buffer zone, and transition zone. Core zone is basically isolated area where no activity is allowed, people are not, tourists are not allowed. Buffer area is outside the core zone, which is basically area where tourism and regulated tourism, and then in sanctuary, what you call as the grazing activities or harvesting of the resources is permitted. Transition zone is basically areas which is generally seen in biosphere reserves, that where people, cropping, forestry operations, training programs, they are basically carried out. Now these are the biosphere reserves which are present in India, and Panna Biosphere Reserve is the latest one, which is basically added to the list, and there are some more biosphere reserves which are proposed for declaration. Now there are 40 World Heritage Sites world over, and in India we have 40. We have 40 in India. In the world, there are there are 832 cultural, 206 national, and 35 mixed heritage sites. Means they are in one landscape as another, and 163 state parties, basically 163 state parties, they basically have more control, or they basically develop these World Heritage Sites, a policy framework for these heritage sites. The maximum numbers are present in uh, Italy, right? They are Italy 53, and then China, they are 52, then Spain 46, and Mexico 34. So that is how the statistics. Besides this, there are specific projects, which have been launched by government from time to time, like say Snow Leopard project, Project Buster, which was launched in 2001 for Great Indian Buster, which has been wiped out from all the states now. The only population which is left is in Rajasthan, and a captive breeding program has been launched or initiated in Rajasthan, and there are about 7-8 birds left in the entire country. So these are the specific programs. Now, these are some of the World Heritage Sites: India, Kaziranga National Park, and Kyoladev, Ghana, which is the closest World Heritage Site from Aligarh, under 35 kilometers. Manas Wildlife Sanctuary, then Nanda Devi Biosphere Reserve or Nanda Devi National Park, Sundarbans National Park, Western Ghats, Great Himalayan National Parks. These are some of the natural conservation areas in country. This is Western Ghats, Shola Forest in Western Ghats, what you call as Sayadri in Sanskrit. That is again the highly fragmented. You can see these patches on the. You have forest patches, and then on the peaks, say above 2,000 meters, we have alpine-like conditions like we have in Himalayas. So these are known as the Shola forests. They are unique as far as the flora and fauna is concerned. The species, endemic species, there are several species of plants and animals which are endemic or which are restricted just to this Shola forest or Shola forest, and they are not seen elsewhere. This is a great hornbill, which has a distribution in moist deciduous forests and evergreen forests mainly. It's Terai area, and Northeast India. It's a large bird which is known as the keystone species because it disperses seeds. Is frugivore. It's a completely sole frugivore. It feeds exclusively on fruits and helps in regeneration of forests by dispersing seeds from one area to another. Big bird. This is basically again in Himalaya, the oak forests, like clean waters, which you don't see in peninsular India. If you see in Deccan, if you see in Gangetic Plain, you see the rivers are highly polluted, whereas in Himalayas, there are still some rivers which are having very clean, neat, and water and pristine ecosystems, which is lacking in down south. This is Valley of Flower, again pristine area because very few people go there, although people have started a lot of tourism, but relative to the areas which are easily accessible, because you have to trek here several kilometers then to reach Valley of Flower. So that is why it is little better than other protected areas. Otherwise, this will also have the same fate. Asian elephant is another endangered species, which again has a wide distribution. It is distributed in rainforest, semi-evergreen forest, then moist deciduous forest. The highest densities of Asian elephant are found in moist deciduous forest because it is several layer. The productivity is very high in moist deciduous forest compared to other forest types in India. So, highest density of elephants are also referred as ecosystem engineers. Ecosystem engineers means that again they also help in regeneration of the forest. They do a lot of damage to the forest and they keep migrating from one forest patch to another. Otherwise, if you have say 50 elephants in say 100 square kilometer area for 1 year, perhaps they will destroy everything. One elephant on average require about 300 kilometer of fodder, grass or browse for its survival. So they keep migrating from one forest to another. They have long migrations and also help in regeneration of the forest through their dung. This is a lion-tailed macaque, which is basically a flagship species. Flagship species are those which can be used as species for spreading the message of general awareness or conservation in comparison to simple other species, because they are eye-catching. Everyone, if you go to Western Ghats, there is a species which is found in Western Ghats, highly fragmented area. All people are familiar with lion-tailed macaque. So if you pick up such species for awareing or making awareness among people, then the message goes very quickly, rather than if you pick up some other species like, say, jackal or any other bird. So this is a flagship species of conservation, and it is restricted to Western Ghats, and the population is under severe threats. These are floating islands, or what you call it, the Pumudis in Manipur. There's a national park where you have in Kabul, Lamjo National Park in Manipur, where we have Manipur bro antler deer, or Manipur dancing deer, the only species which is basically critically endangered. Not only species, sorry, the species which is critically threatened, and the only population which is present only in Manipur, nowhere else. So that is the area where this is the areas where this Manipur deer or Manipur bro antler deer or Manipur dancing deer is found. Very typical habitats within the lake. You have floating islands, and there are unique biodiversity, biological values which are found in these natural floating islands in Manipur. Now, as far as the values of biodiversity concerned, it has ecological significance. Like, say, watersheds, tropical and subtropical rainforests. They are basically harboring enormous biodiversity and resulting in economy or basically sources of economy, revenue generation to government and local people. Thousands of flora and fauna elements, assemblages, they are found here. So that is the ecological significance of the protected areas. They provide enormous ecosystem services. Now, ecosystem services is a term which is now used nowadays, and all the biodiversity they provide in one way or other, they are connected or they are linked to providing ecosystem services like trees, like wetlands, water, rivers, forests. They provide us enormous ecosystem services for our day-to-day survival. As far as the quantification of the ecosystem services is concerned, it is a very tedious or it's a very difficult task, and people or biologists all over the world, they are trying to refine the methods for quantifying ecosystem services, which is a very difficult, Herculean task. Like, say, a tree is providing us oxygen, it is absorbing carbon dioxide, so it is every day connected to our everyday survival. But to what extent, that is difficult to say. To what extent, right? So regional connectivity, the protected areas, they provide the connectivity among forest landscapes, among different protected areas, among biosphere reserves and wildlife sanctuaries, among community reserves and other protected areas like, say, national park and wildlife sanctuaries. So that is the ecological significance. They provide us sites for studying what is happening in the protected areas, which are, say, pristine, where disturbances are not there or minimum, and what is happening just outside these protected areas. So very fine sites for studying and documenting changes which are happening globally. Then economic, as I told you, that forest itself, wetlands, fisheries, enormous, lot of revenue, lot of economy is generated, or they are linked to economy. 128 trillion rupees are generated as a result of forests itself every year. Then the carbon, coal. Then you can think of irrigation, power dams, electricity generation, tourism. Millions, billions of rupees are generated because of ecosystem services and because of biodiversity values of protected areas. It also has cultural significance. Religious sites, like, say, I'll talk in the end about the sacred groves. Now, sacred groves are the areas, patches of forests or other grasslands which are connected because to conservation because of some religious sentiments of the people. कुछ वहाँ पे religious deities हैं, like a temple, mosque or church, and all people, they have their own sentiments connected with that. So they take care of all the flora and fauna which is present in these small isolated pockets. Now population has increased, livestock has increased, and even these sacred groups, these areas are also under tremendous pressure. And the government is emphasizing, people are emphasizing, NGOs are emphasizing that let us bring these sacred groups also under the protected area network because they are also under severe threats. So we are now forgetting our culture also. We are not bothered. We are bothered only about money. So money, economy, or commercial. People have become highly commercial, and hardly anyone is worried about no biodiversity, which, as I told you, by 2050 we'll be losing about 63% of our biological values as different prediction models or prediction uh, uh, papers findings have been brought in. Now, the major trends we'll talk about quickly that what are the major trends? If you see, most of the biodiversity is present in tropical countries, tropical areas where you have high rainfall and high temperature and high precipitation. Those areas are extremely rich in biological diversity, and generally they happen to be around the equator. जो आपका भूमध्य रेखा है उसके आसपास जो लैटिट्यूड्स हैं 30 ऊपर और 30 डिग्री नीचे, उनमें जो है बहुत ज्यादा डाइवर्सिटी है. क्यों ऐसा है? Because people say that scientists, they say that it has a long ecological history, and these environments or these latitudes are highly stable compared to the latitudes which are present towards the poles away from the equator. So those areas are less stable because they are and their rainfall is also low, temperature are extremely low, so therefore productivity is very low. Whereas along the equator, the productivity is very high, and the several hypotheses have been proposed by scientists, like say environmental stability hypothesis, environmental variability hypothesis, then biomass productivity hypothesis, and so on and so forth. Such several hypotheses have been proposed, and they have very contrasting and contradicting explanations. MacArthur, famous ecologist from North America, MacArthur, 1972, proposed a productivity hypothesis which explains how these equators or how these tropical countries are very rich in biological diversity. Like say, the reason which was given by him is that the productivity is very high, the biomass accumulation along the equators is very high, and once the biomass is very high, the niches, ecological niches, what you call as the species which are required by particular species in order to fulfill its daily requirement, like say food. So productivity is very high, so therefore the ecological niches or areas which are occupied by species for fulfilling their daily requirements are smaller because productivity is very high. So they can fulfill their requirements in very small area. So therefore, there are several assemblages which have accumulated in these areas over the thousands and thousands of years. So that is why the MacArthur explained, and this is the best productivity hypothesis has been accepted as the most, or is the best hypothesis to explain the extreme richness along the equators in terms of biological diversity. As we go away from the equators, yes, please. Within a given altitudinal belt in the tropics, the number of tree species increases with increased rainfall. As the rainfall increases, the tree species, the numbers, they also increase. And across altitudinal belt, if you go from lower to higher elevations, the number of trees, they decrease. If you go to areas like say Trans-Himalayas above tree line, there are no trees.
Alka ma'am, please mute yourself.
When you move, okay, so as we move along the altitudinal gradients, altitudinal belts, the productivity decreases because temperature increases, number of trees decreases, the value of biological diversities, they decrease. So that is another very important trend, that as we go up along the elevational gradient, temperature decreases, productivity decreases, the diversity decreases, number of trees decreases, number of trees shrub species decreases, bushes decreases, well decreases. No, when we reach in Trans-Himalayas above tree line, there are no trees. Like so, we have a very rugged terrain, and biological diversity in Trans-Himalayas is extremely low, very low. Little disturbance, little perturbance there will have cascading impact, or say very long-term changing impact on the biological diversity. Tropical mountainous areas support a large number of species. No, जो ट्रॉपिक्स में, जैसे आप अफ्रीका में देखेंगे जो माउंटेन एरियाज हैं, वहां पे जो डाइवर्सिटी बहुत ज्यादा है कंपेयर टू नॉर्थ अमेरिका. नो, say higher latitudinal gradients. Again, the reason being same, I have already explained you. So tropical mountainous areas, particularly the high mountain areas, they support a very large number of plants and animals than equivalent temperate areas. उतना ही एरिया अगर आप है हाई लैटिट्यूड में लेंगे तो वहां पे जो है species of plants and animals will be very less. Ecosystem with severe limiting factors such as high salinity, then flooding, freezing temperatures have reduced species richness. All these basically factors that result in reduced species richness. Like say if you go to Kutch area, if you go to desert, it has very low diversity compared to semi-arid, biographic zone, or compared to Western Ghats, because the factors are very harsh there, very limited, very low rainfall, and temperatures very high. Right? As rain forests recover from disturbance by acute events such as hurricanes or what you call as fire, species diversity increases in the disturbed area until a peak is reached. मतलब जहाँ पे disturbance होगी तो वहाँ पे जो है because of fires, अगर आपको forest fire होगी और जो है कहीं fire नहीं है, तो जब recover करने लगा एरिया तो जो forest fire patches हैं वहाँ पे diversity बहुत quickly जो बढ़ेगी. Whereas those areas which are intact, there it is not, because there are several factors basically here. No, fly ash which is generated that has several minerals, no, many important macro and micronutrients which are locked up in the leaves or blades of the plants. After fires, they are released into the soil, so fertility increases. So therefore, more and more plants grow there, and they are different from the surrounding area. So therefore, the productivity is very high. So the stability is reached in these burnt patches or in disturbed patches far earlier than the surrounding areas. So these are the reasons for these changes or cascading changes with disturbances in the biological diversity. High yield systems under intensive human management are species poor. As I told you, I gave you an example that in Western Ghats, जो आपके जो evergreen forest है उसके adjacent areas में जो privately owned forest है, वहाँ पे लोगों ने जो national forest है उनको remove कर दिया है और वहाँ पे monocultures which are commercial in nature, no high yield varieties, they have been sown, and therefore that diversity has been replaced by very few species. So that is the flip side of converting, or that is the negative of converting the natural areas and diminishing or reducing the biological diversity. The landscape is not informed in terms of species diversity. There is a high heterogeneity. All areas, all species, they tend to be highly heterogeneous. मतलब आप देखेंगे कुछ एरियाज हैं जहाँ पे आपको यूनिफॉर्मिटी दिखेगी, जैसे ग्रासलैंड आपको दूर से दिखता है या सवाना दिखता है कि पूरा ग्रास दिख रहा है, नो 1000 square kilometers, it's looking like same. But when you go close, it will have a large diversity. There are several assemblages of species. From a distance, it is looking grassland, but if you go, there are hundreds and thousands of species. So it is looking, although homogeneous from a distance, but it is actually heterogeneous. Means there are several species. It is an amalgam of several species, association, assemblages of different species, rather than what it is appearing as a grassland from a distance. So all biological values, they tend to be distributed heterogeneously. That is why there is conflict. Those countries which are having very high diversity, very high biodiversity values, they are fighting with other countries which are poor. Okay, we want to exploit the sources of the world, and you supply us at moderate rate or less rate, and we will use it first, and then the rest of the people. So that is the conflict because of this heterogeneous distribution of biological diversity. Now, what are the different factors which are basically resulting in biodiversity loss, habitat destruction, alteration, degradation? So these are very appear as if synonymous terms. They appear as like say same, but they are actually different. No, habitat destruction is like say you have a forest and then there is a no industry came up there, and then it is entire forest is converted, replaced by industry. So that is destruction. Means we have destroyed the forest and set up a industry there. Alteration है जैसे आपका wetland है, wetland में आपने जो है grazing करी और slowly जो है wetland जो है convert हो गया आपका forest में और या grassland में. So that means the wetland has been converted into grassland. So it is a conversion, alteration. The wetland habitat has been converted into grassland. Degradation है जैसे आपका grassland है उसमें या forest है, you are people are continuously grazing or overgrazing the area, so the area become degraded. So that is degradation. So that is how these terms they are differentiated. Degradation means that the pristine or say moderate area which is harboring very good biological values, biodiversity values, you graze it, you bring it under tremendous human pressure, it will get degraded within few years. So that is how the degradation or decay of the habitats or the areas happen. Mining, many areas there is enormous mining going on. Like say if you go to Orissa, if you go to Bihar, if you go to Deccan, if you go to Rudramukh area in Karnataka, a lot of mining operations are going, and mining means losing biodiversity. It is directly related to loss of biological diversity. Even government, certain cases, government also has given permission for thousands and thousands of hectares have been given for mining because they have no option. It is very rich in minerals, so a lot of revenue collection is connected with it. So that is how mining also results in loss of biological diversity. Toxic substances are released in fresh and marine environments. Several sewages, effluents from hotels, then industries, they are thrown in wetlands, rivers, marine areas, and many species they are being lost before even they are reported, right? So that is why, because of toxic, we are making the environment toxic. You see the rivers around Aligarh black, Kali Nadi, very close to Aligarh when you go towards Atrauli area. Kali Nadi, their names have been renamed as Kali Nadi because of pollution, excessive pollution. Dams and canals, all whether because of irrigation or hydroelectricity generation, canal for again irrigation. These setups are coming up across landscapes, across different regions, and they are also resulting in loss of biological diversity. Once a dam comes, all the plants, animals, microbiota which is present there, it is eliminated from that area. Indira Gandhi Nehar Pariyojana, if some of you economics or geography people may be knowing, it started somewhere in 1965 because Thar Desert or Western India, it is a very hostile area, very low rainfall, and one of the most populated deserts of the world. Agar aap Sahara वगैरह area में जाएंगे, sub-Saharan area में, miles and miles there are no people, but in Thar Desert, in Indian desert, we still have people. If you travel 40 kilometers, you will get a village, right? So these areas, now there's severe crisis of water. So 1965, government started Indira Nehar Pariyojana, and still it is incomplete. And the entire area surrounding this Indira Gandhi Nehar Pariyojana, the entire area has been converted into a totally different landscape, totally different. There are plants, there are trees, there are animals, there are birds, which have never been seen there. They are now being sighted there because of this. So this is basically change. Although water was brought there for people, but it has resulted in loss of native species and their replacement by species which were never seen there. So there are such developmental activities. They are also connected with loss of biological diversity. Then collection and exploitation of forest produce. As far as sustainable harvesting resources is concerned, they do not impact, but when more and more people, they start invading, they start entering forest, start entering protected areas or even reserve forest, the biodiversity values or the biological diversity of that area we start losing them. Species. Sometimes because of commercial also, pharmaceuticals, medicinal plants, cosmetic plants, they are harvested from forests at much alarming rates than they were say 100 years ago, because demands for these products is very high in the national and international market. Pharmaceutical industries, the raw material is forest, basically plants. So all raw material provided by forests. So more and more pressure. So loss of biological diversity. Fishing. No, fish again, we think that it is unlimited resource, but there are many species which are now under severe threat because they are being threatened by over-harvesting, by their over-harvesting or overfishing. And not only fishing, when we fish, no, lot of other accidental species like many turtle species, birds, they are trapped in the nets and they are also killed. So therefore, resulting in loss of biological diversity. Human-wildlife interactions, several places like tigers, elephants, bears, they are the species which are in direct conflict with humans, and many animals they are killed, and they also prey on their livestock. They kill their livestock. People are killed. So they are also, to some extent, people become hostile. They burn the forest if the two people are killed by tiger or elephant. So that is how it is connected with loss of biological diversity. Introduction of exotics, exotic species. Sometimes, even without forest department, they also introduce exotic species because they are fast growing. They turn the area green quickly compared to other species. So that is why they are chosen rather than the native species. Now it has been stopped more or less, but still at certain places, we are using exotic species because they are fast growers and they can grow with bare minimum requirements. In rocks, you plant a tree, it will basically grow there, right? And it is estimated that 18% of the Indian flora comprises invasive alien species, right? Alien, Indian, hey, you, 18%. And of which 55% are American, and 10% Asian, 20% Asian and Malaysian, and 15% are from Central Asian countries and European countries. So 18% of our species, plants, whether it's plants or animals, they are already exotic. Largely, they are plants. Animals, they are only in zoos, but in as far as flora, most of these 18%, they are basically flora. Now, commercial threats, aquaculture, right, say for prawns, for fish, then for other purposes, we use aquaculture, commercial fishing, bamboo extraction for various products, furniture, right? Construction of roads, rails, canals, gas pipes, continuously. These projects, these proposals are coming every now and then, and it will never stop. Dumping toxic waste such as fly ash near boundary of protected areas. Very close, 4 or 5 kilometers from Aligarh, there is a fly ash pan, which used to be a wetland some 20 years ago. Now it has been converted into a flatland, and because of the Kasimpur power plant, the fly ash is coal is used for generating electricity, and the fly ash is thrown there, and the entire ecosystem has got changed, and lots of birds, which were migratory birds, which used to come there, they are now nursing there. Monocultures, commercial plantations, they are basically resulting in loss of biological diversity, poaching of wildlife illegally, setting up of polluting factories or oil refineries in the vicinity of protected areas. If you happen to go to coastal areas, several such polluting factories, they are come up, oil refineries, they have come up, and resulting in a replacement of native species, loss of native species. Defense establishments such as firing ranges, military, new establishment, then they have to develop a firing range. So they have to clear an area. So all the species which are there, they are cleared and they are vanished, at least locally extirpated. Near Aligarh also defense corridor, several wetlands, drainage channels, they have been cut, and water is being stored for as a defense corridor, because Aligarh is coming under defense corridor. We went 3-4 years ago, and the wetland, there's a place called as Khemai, which is around 50 kilometers from here. And that entire wetland, it was having migratory fowl, waterfowl, coming from other countries, surrounding countries, and local waterfowl, and 3 to 4 species of critically endangered turtle species. They were found there. That has been converted completely into deep channels, and where water is stored for defense corridor. So these are basically problems which appear small, but they have very long-term consequences as far as the biological diversity is concerned. Introduction of exotic species in the ecosystem, some species like Congress grass, or what you call as the carrot wheat, it has virtually invaded all states, all basically islands. Lantana, Camara, most of you may be familiar. Almost all states it has reached. They have come from North America, Mexico. They have reached virtually, and they have replaced native species. Tourism, excessive tourism, no trampling vegetation in, say, deserts, or in, say, sensitive ecosystems, which are very fragile ecosystems, low rainfall. So those areas, excessive tourism is also resulting in loss of biological diversity. Over extraction of medicinal plants, herbs for industrial purpose, for commercial utilization, urban growth in vicinity of protected areas. Urban areas are expanding, and even protected areas, they have not been spared. Hunting and fishing, planting mesquite in, say, desert areas or semi-arid areas. If you go, as per National Forestry Policy Plan, Indian Forest Policy Plan 90, we should have at least 33% of area as forest cover, green cover. So many states, they are not having 33%. And very low, less, not even 1%, 2%. So they, in such areas, this Prosopis juliflora, exotic species, is being planted at very large scale, alarming rate, and it has virtually replaced the native species in Gujarat, Maharashtra, Kutch area, then Rajasthan. Desert, what you call Thar Desert, this Prosopis juliflora, it has replaced several native species. And accidents and climate change. They also basically, climate change is resulting in loss of biological diversity. All of us are familiar with this. Accident is like, say, for instance, a gas pipeline is going and there's a leakage. There's a fire, then all the native species. Now, these examples have been cited from time to time in the history. If you look back, right, a LPG gas truck which is going, there's a supposed fire. Perhaps all the forests within 120 kilometers, everything will be wiped out. So potential hazards of such accidents also are connected with biodiversity loss. Wildlife diseases is again one lacking area where not much research has been conducted in India, and many species are very severely affected by wildlife disease spread over. There are examples of livestock. There are examples of wild species which have been eliminated as a result of spread of wildlife disease, such as foot-and-mouth disease, then canine distemper. Quality reintroduction. If a species is reintroduced in a wrong place, then that also has basically very negative impact on loss of biological diversity. Poor decision making and policy choices, like, say, express highways, railway network. Sometimes this wrong policy making and choices, they also result in biodiversity loss. Human-induced disturbance to ecosystems, most of pressure on biological diversity results due to it. Human-mediated disturbances are the most dangerous, basically. The most dangerous are human-mediated, which has resulted the maximum damage to biological diversity. These are the these is sketch basically interrelationship between ecological values, religious sentiments or beliefs, and traditional values and causes of degradation of sacred groups. Areas where you have some species or some biological values which are of immense use to people. Now, this is an outcome of religious beliefs, as we have traditional cultural values or conservation values, or the taboos which are associated with them, and social cultural practices. Now here, ecological values of sacred values are sacred groups are like, say, maintenance of ecological balance in the area, not only the sacred groups but in the surrounding areas also. Conservation of biological diversity, they are helping in conserving biological diversity. Supply of resources to the people. Then the causes of degradation of the causes of the degradation are like, say, human impact on sacred groups, because population have increased several fold and we are not even sparing these important sites which are to which we are culturally and religiously connected or associated. Change in people attitudes towards socio-cultural practices. Now there is a drastic change in people's social cultural interface or practices. People are changing, they are evolving. They are not believing in religion. They are not believing in religious sentiments. That is how this is happening. Erosion of religious beliefs and traditional values. People are losing traditional values. पहले लोग सोचते थे कि यार मेरे को इससे medicine मिलनी है, मैं इसको कोई damage नहीं करूँगा. ताकि मैं इसको लंबे समय तक यूज करता रहूं। अब वो लोगों में वैल्यू नहीं रही है कि आज जो मिल रहा है बस उसी को निकाल लो, कल को नहीं रहेगा, कल की देखी जाएगी। तो दिस concept is very dangerous. And human impact on sacred group is developmental activities. We have not spared now sacred groups also. That is why NGOs and scientists are saying that bring these sacred groups also under the protected area network. Otherwise, we are going to lose all of them very soon. Increased population pressure, right? These are habitat degradation, forest fragmentation, encroachment on these sacred groups also, and exploitation of their sources largely. So that is the thing. Take-home lesson, okay, I'm concluding now this, is that it has become clear that repairing of our flawed relationship with nature is one of the ways to mitigate climate change and curb future outbreaks of infectious diseases that can bring misery to all of us and in an imaginable manner. Now, COVID-19 is also a result of human disturbance. No, we are playing with microorganisms in labs. If they leave, what will happen? No one knows. No? So that is what. So they take home that we should interfere, we should intervene, we should exploit nature as less as possible. And preserving biological diversity is thus directly relevant to social, economic, and cultural. Lastly, I will sum up again. A German scientist or ecologist has said that I am an ecologist and would be happier if people were convinced just by having nice nature and lots of species. No, जनरल आदमी सोचा है कि मेरे किनारे जो है अच्छा नेचर होना चाहिए, अच्छा फॉरेस्ट होना चाहिए, नए स्पीशीज, ज्यादा स्पीशीज होना चाहिए. No, that is a general perception, but this perception has now changed. No, but this is not the way the world works at the moment now. And usually, most convincing argument is money, that people have become commercial, highly commercial and money-minded, and that religious sentiments or general approach toward conservation, that we should not harm Mother Nature, that is somehow people are losing it slowly. That is why so many awareness campaigns and so many conservation programs are underway, that let us inculcate people that we should not alter nature, we should not interfere much with nature. And this mindset is perhaps the most dangerous question for the biological diversity. So thank you very much. And if you have any query, please.
Thank you so much, sir. Very
Thank you,
Thank
sir.
you, sir.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. Thank you very much.